Hello, and welcome to episode of the Bubbs on Sports podcast. Today is Tuesday, June 6th. Hope everyone's having a day so far and had a good rest of their day yesterday. It is, in fact, Tuesday, June 6th here today. We've got a lot to get into. An exciting night ahead of us after last night being a little bit of a quiet night in New York baseball as the Yankees and the Mets both had the night off. They will be back in action tonight. Mets will visit Atlanta for a crucial three-game set against the Braves. Yankees will be back home welcoming the White Sox for a three-game set at Yankee Stadium. It's a six-game homestand, six of them against the Sox. You got the White Sox to open up here for the three games, and then starting on Friday, you'll have the Red Sox coming to town for three games, and that series will be starting on Friday and ending on Sunday, which will be Sunday Night Baseball. So another Sunday Night Baseball coming up for the Yankees, an exciting series there against the Red Sox. Rivalry not quite where it used to be, not quite where many people remember it, but it is still fun anytime the Yankees and Red Sox play each other. Again, there's not quite the amount of juice that the series it once had, with the Red Sox not quite being as good anymore, back in the 90s and the 2000s and the history and when the Red Sox had the drought and all that stuff, it was a lot more heated. Now it's not as heated, but still a good series to watch, an exciting series coming up. But the Yankees have a White Sox series coming up here that it's against a struggling White Sox team, a team you should beat. We'll see if they can get the job done. And for the Mets, it's against a really good Braves team. And I think if you're the Mets, you're lucky if you come out of there with at least one win. I mean, if you go in there and get swept and fall to 3 games below 500, things really get ugly if you're the New York Mets. So a big series there coming up tonight in Atlanta as well for the Mets. We got a lot to get into today. Vegas won Game 2. They take a 2-0 lead. Absolutely destroyed the Florida Panthers last night. So an ugly game for Florida. They will look to even it up on Thursday, 7-2 last night. An ugly game, a pathetic performance by the Panthers. They'll be back home on Thursday. Look, you win on Thursday, you're right back in the series. You lose on Thursday, it's over. No way you're coming back from down 3-0. So if you're Vegas, you got to feel pretty good about yourself right now. And if you're Florida, you got your backs against the wall. You got to find a way to win Game 3, get the series back to a series, get the game, get it back to 2-1. And kind of just erase these last 2 games, which has been ugly to say the least. If you're the Florida Panthers, where in Game 1, you scored early, it was a close game. You go into the third, Vegas scores 3 goals, and last night from the get-go, it was all Vegas, and it was only Vegas last night. Florida didn't even show up, so they'll be back in Florida on Thursday for Game 3, a must-win for the Panthers as they look to get back into the series as well. So we'll get into that here a little bit later on, along with all the other stuff going on tonight. We'll preview the Yankees and Mets games. Get you ready for that big night tonight. We're going to start off today talking about the New York Giants. Is the New York Giants receiving core, are these receivers good enough for the New York Giants? Or do they still need to add? Do they still need to bring in one more guy? Is that a DeAndre Hopkins? Is that trading for another big-name receiver? Because when I look at this receiving core, I see a lot of things, but I don't see a legitimate number one. Is that a reason to be concerned if you're a New York Giants fan when you look at that receiving core? We're going to get into that here to open up the show. I also am going to get into a little bit of golf. Yes, I don't talk much golf on this channel. Very rarely do I talk golf, but I've got to talk a little bit about the PGA Tour and LIV Golf combining to make one giant golf tour, which seems really crazy. It is kind of crazy. I'll break it all down, get into that here a little bit later on. Won't spend a ton of time on it because I'm not a diehard golf fan, but it was something that struck the sports world today. It's been something that's, made headlines over the past couple years here since, the LIV made a league from, the Saudi government, obviously, all the controversy there, all the money that it's giving the players, to the public rift between the PGA and the LIV Golf, the things PGA and the commissioner of the PGA has said, to now all of a sudden come to an agreement. It shows you money can be the ultimate power thing ever. Like, you bring money involved, more money for both sides. No matter what the history tells us, both sides are going to agree, and that's what just happened. So the PGA, LIV, DP World Tour as well, which is a European league, have all combined into one. I'll give you my thoughts, give you kind of my raw reaction to this. Again, don't have many huge opinions on it, but It's changing the game of golf for sure. We'll get to that here a little bit later on. Again, don't talk a ton of golf. This will probably be the only time I talk golf. But it's definitely an interesting storyline here on this Tuesday program. So we're going to start off today with the Giants. Obviously, as the offseason continues to roll on here, you got the OTAs and stuff here starting up. Next week, you'll have mandatory minicamp. Today, we did hear from Robert Saleh. I'll have more on that on my Jets podcast later on. I'll probably do that later on. It's either going to be uploaded later today or tomorrow. You can find that on Entrenched with Gangrene, so definitely go give that a listen. Appreciate all the support. That will be there tomorrow or later today. But Robert Saleh said today the Jets are canceling mandatory minicamp because he feels that they put enough work in throughout this spring and here early parts of June. They feel that giving them that extra week next week off, where they'll be obviously that's going to be the start of the 40-day rest period where they're not at the facility, they're away from football for 40 days. It's like their 40-day vacation, and when they come back, training camp begins, and right from there all the way until January. Hopefully the Jets are playing well into January, maybe even February. It's full on football from that point forward. So that's why you get that 40-day off period. So the Jets canceled mandatory minicamp. We'll get to the Giants here in a second, but just wanted to give you this quick note here. So they canceled mandatory minicamp because the Jets and the Browns both have to report to training camp a week earlier. So Saleh, instead of letting them practice next week at mandatory minicamp, and then usually they get a week off and then they kind of do football activities on their own, instead of kind of rushing that and then having to get back a week earlier, they're taking off that week so then they could still get that rest, that normal 40-day rest period, as opposed to a little bit less than that. So that's the Jets' thought process there, because they're playing in the Hall of Fame game, which is August 4th. And that's the first preseason game, and they have to report to training camp a week earlier than all other NFL teams. It's actually August 3rd. I apologize. So they have to report much earlier. A lot of teams are reporting like July 28th, July 27th. Jets have to report a lot earlier because they have a game August 3rd, which is super, super early considering most teams start up August 12th, August 13th, August 11th with the preseason game. So that just wanted to get that off here out there, was one of the stories today in the NFL. But when you look at the Giants here, obviously, when you look at the Jets and their offseason that they had, bringing in a ton of big names, not a ton of big names, but bringing in the big name that was Aaron Rodgers, bringing in Alan Lazard, obviously, making some other moves here and there as well. When you look at the Giants, they've had a little bit more of a quieter offseason. They obviously brought back Dexter Lawrence, which was a very good move for the New York Giants, something that you felt they needed to do. They obviously, extended Daniel Jones, something that was really one of the big headlines, not only just for the Giants, but one of the bigger headlines in the NFL as to how much money the Giants were going to give them, as to how much money Daniel Jones wanted, what the Giants were willing to give him, what the fan base wanted. It was definitely, there was a lot of conversations there over the course of the offseason about what was going to take place with Daniel Jones. They ended up getting an extension done. It was a good move for the Giants. They lock up Daniel Jones after a very good year last year with very little weapons around him. They've surrounded him with a couple more pieces. Are those pieces good enough? We'll get to that here in a second. When you look at their offensive line, they obviously got John Michael Schmitz. They brought in Jalen Hyatt, a receiver. So the Giants has put together a nice offseason. Again, the Giants aren't in. They've already got Leonard Williams. They've already got Dexter Lawrence, which is one of the better interior defensive lines in the league. Leonard Williams and Dexter Lawrence, Leonard Williams on the edge and Dexter Lawrence in the interior, is one of the better 1-2 punches in football. You obviously also have Kayvon Thibodeau as well. The Giants have a lot of exciting pieces on the defensive side of the ball. Xavier McKinney last year missed a lot of time with the whole Cabo incident, whatever it is, when during the bye week where he was on a sightseeing tour and he broke his hand and missed a good chunk of the season, came back late but missed a lot of the year. You get him back this year healthy. When you look at the Giants on the defensive side of the football, you like it a lot. Linebackers, sure, they're still, they've still got Bobby Okwire. You've got Azeez Ojulari. They've got some pieces there. Maybe the linebacker is still a little bit, you kind of like the pieces that they brought in. They do have some solid linebacker pieces. It's probably better than it was last year, but all in all, when you look at the secondary, Adoree Jackson, Xavier McKinney, obviously, Deonte Banks in the secondary, who was the guy that they drafted out of Maryland, their first-round pick. A lot of excitement there around him as a corner. You like where the Giants are at defensively. again, especially up front, extending Dexter Lawrence was the right decision. Leonard Williams is back. You got Kayvon Thibodeau for obviously in his second season in the league. You expect him to continue to make progress. Last year was really solid, had a really solid season. Had some ups and downs, but all in all, had a couple really big games. He had a really big game, against Washington, that Sunday night game where he had the game of his career. It was his best game earlier in his career. Had a really nice year for Kayvon Thibodeau, and you expect him to continue to make strides. And again, this Giant team's young. That's why the Giants aren't quite on that Super Bowl level. And I think people have to get to that realization. They got to the playoffs last year. It was cool to see. It was good to see. If you're a Giants fan, they made the run. It was, nobody expected it coming. This year, I think if you're a Giants fan, you probably have to expect to somewhere around 9 wins. They'll be in the playoff conversation again. Do they get to the postseason or not? We'll see, but they'll definitely be in the conversation again. And the NFC is weak. I mean, you can look at the NFC right now and look at it and say, there's 2 teams in the NFC that probably are legitimate Super Bowl contenders. San Francisco, with their defense, and if they can get their quarterback situation, if Brock Purdy does what he did last year, you like your chances there. And what Kyle Shanahan can do, they've also got a ton of weapons with Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel. To be honest with you, San Francisco has and can continue to win without excellent quarterback play. San Francisco, Kyle Shanahan has shown he doesn't need excellent quarterback play to get to the playoffs and make deep runs in the postseason. He doesn't need it. Sure, Jimmy G was good, but it was a lot of defense. It was a lot of the other weapons. Brock Purdy last year was good, but it wasn't like he was playing like Patrick Mahomes. It was the defense, and it was the other weapons. So the Niners and the Eagles really are your main threat. So you do expect the Giants probably to be, again, in the conversation. You have Seattle, you have Minnesota. You obviously got Dallas that will probably get in. How far do they go? I don't know. I think Detroit's a dark horse. I do think Detroit could potentially make a deep run. But again, you're relying on Jared Goff to make a deep postseason run. There are concerns there. Eagles and San Francisco are probably your 2 legitimate Super Bowl contenders. When you look at the AFC, you've got a ton. I mean, you've got the Bills, you've got the Jets, you've got the Bengals, you've got the Chiefs. Those are probably like your realistic 4 teams. Maybe you want to throw the Chargers in there. Maybe you want to throw the Ravens. Again, Lamar hasn't had much postseason success. You could throw the Chargers in there, but can Brandon Staley, is he good enough as a coach to get a team deep in the postseason? Justin Herbert can Staley do it? And there was some concerns there going into this year after he blows that big lead against Jacksonville last year in the wild card game. So there's a chance there they get there. But when I still look at this Giants team, and we've talked about this, over the course of the offseason, there's been a lot of names, that have been thrown out there at the way beginning of the offseason when you look at the New York Giants. And obviously it was, T. Higgins was thrown out there as a potential name. You looked at now DeAndre Hopkins has become available. You looked via the draft, potential guys, whether it was a Jackson Smith-Njigba, whether it was a Jordan Addison. They brought in Jalen Hyatt, which I really like that pick. I truly believe they got a borderline first-round talent in the later rounds. I think Jalen Hyatt's going to be phenomenal for the New York Giants. But one thing this Giants receiving room is lacking is still that legit number 1 threat. And is that a reason to be concerned if you're a New York Giants fan? Now, I'll tell you this. I'll give you the things I like about this Giants receiving room. It's deep. Like, there's a lot of good talent. There's not anybody great. You don't have a Garrett Wilson like the Jets do, just using the other team in New York to go on, to move away from the Jets. You don't have a Stephon Diggs. You don't have a Tyreek Hill. You don't even, you look at your own division, you don't have a CeeDee Lamb. You don't have an A.J. Brown or even a Devontae Smith. You don't have a CeeDee Lamb. Terry McLaurin, who I know some people, maybe the Giants or the Washington, if they're really bad, does McLaurin want out? Do the Giants maybe capitalize on that? Who knows what happens? I know that's been some chatter with some Giants fans. I wouldn't hate that idea. I think if you're a Giants fan and Terry McLaurin becomes available, you 100% take a chance. Is Washington going to want to trade him within the division? I don't know. Probably not. But if you give him if you're willing to give up draft picks and if you feel it's a big need, sure. That's more down the road. I don't think that's going to be something that happens now, but is that somebody that maybe breaks through early in the season if things are going really rough and maybe the Giants, it becomes available? I don't know. He's a guy to look out for. But you even look within your own division. They don't have that legit number one, but they do have a lot of depth. And when you look at this six-man rotation that the Giants have at receiver, realistically, it's probably going to be Isaiah Hodgins, Darius Slayton, Paris Campbell, Jalen Hyatt, Wan'Dale Robinson, Sterling Shepard. Now, there might be one other guy. Jameson Crowder, former Jet. Jeff Smith, former Jet. Both fighting for some roster spots as well. It's deep. It's going to be tough to make this Giants team. It's going to be tough to break camp as a receiver and make it as depth. Make it on the active roster. I mean, a guy in Colin Johnson is really probably like the third guy up to make a roster spot, and he played 12 games last year for the Giants. He wasn't very good. He didn't get many snaps, but he played in 12 games. It just shows you now he's probably going to be off the roster. So the Giants, in terms of their receiving core, have come far. That's one thing I do like about it, is they do have a lot of depth. It's deep. They have a lot of good receivers. They don't, and that's why I think they don't have that true number one guy, but they have six solid receivers. They don't have a true number one, but they have six good receivers. That's one thing I do like, is they are deep. Another thing I do like is they're all young. Isaiah Hodgins is 24. Darius Slayton's 26. Paris Campbell's 25. Wan'Dale Robinson's 22. Sterling Shepard's the only odd man out. He's 30. And the injuries are a concern. Jalen Hyatt's 21, obviously freshly drafted. He's a rookie, so he's young. That's another thing. They're young. They're youth. And I think that's the Giants' kind of approach here when you look at the receiving room, is they're young, they're developing. You assume Wan'Dale Robinson, who got hurt last year, is only going to get better. If Sterling Shepard can stay healthy, you know what he can do. He can be a really solid piece for you when he's healthy. You hope that Isaiah Hodgins, who found a lot of success last year in the Brian Daboll scheme, can continue to play well and gets more reps and gets more opportunities, gets a bigger run this year. Obviously had the really big game against the Vikings last year. You hope he can continue to play well. So there is a lot of potential there, and I think the Giants are banking on the potential. Those are some of the things I like. Again, a lot of speed too. Wan'Dale Robinson's explosive. Jalen Hyatt's explosive. Those are just some of your speed guys. They can really break out. They can, 5-6 yard slants across the middle. They can turn that into a 15, 20-yard gain. Really good in open field. Really explosive, quick, young, fresh. You like that when you look at that receiving core. And the big thing there is, the speed. Now, those are some of the things I like. Again, young. It's deep. I mean, again, you look at some of the guys that might get cut. They're guys that are solid. I mean, like Jameson Crowder, Jeff Smith, both those guys could potentially play a role in an NFL roster. I mean, last year they played a role for the Jets. Jeff Smith did, right? Now they're potentially not even going to be able to make the roster, which is, interesting to think about when you look at, potentially you throw them on, I don't know, I'm just using a team, like you throw them on the Washington Commanders right now, the team in your division, they probably make the roster. So they are deep there. It is a bunch of average to above average receivers, but they have a lot of deep talent there. They're all young. You got some speed. They're going to develop, all that stuff. Now, some things I don't like about this Giants receiving core is there's a lot of injury-prone guys when you look at this Giants receiving core. Sterling Shepard, injury-prone. Darius Slayton has dealt with some injuries, right? When you look at him over his career, again, he played 16 games last year, played 13 games the year before. He's primarily been healthy, but he has dealt with some minor things here and there. He's primarily healthy, though. But Sterling Shepard, he's been so injury-prone. And Wan'Dale Robinson last year, after he had the best game of his career, got hurt and went down for the season. He's got an injury history. So can these guys stay healthy? Are they really reliable? That's a legitimate concern going into the season. Now, when you look at Paris Campbell, he's another guy. Last year he played 17 games last year. Prior to last season, he played 7 games in 2019, 2 games in 2020, and 6 games in 2021. Can you fully rely on Paris Campbell to go out there and consistently get reps, consistently play? On and off the field in Indy. Now, obviously, got a full run last year, was solid, 623 yards, 63 catches, 3 touchdowns. But can you rely on him? Again, he's young. He's only 25, but can you rely on him to get, when he gets consistent reps, to stay out there, stay available? So there is a little bit of concern there. And that's the one thing that I don't like is the Giants' big receiver acquisition this offseason was Paris Campbell. And again, I'm not trying to knock Paris Campbell, not trying to knock the Giants, but when you went into the offseason and you looked at what the potential options were for the New York Giants, and you looked at T. Higgins, everybody said, if DeAndre Hopkins, people were saying this about the Giants back in March, January, February, during the offseason, people were saying this back in March, if DeAndre Hopkins, because you could tell there was friction there between him and Arizona, people were saying, if DeAndre Hopkins became available, Giants should capitalize. Now he is available. Are the Giants going to capitalize? Probably not, but when you looked at the beginning of the offseason, you looked at the names that were available that the Giants were tied to, and your big offseason acquisition was Paris Campbell, you're kind of like, you got to be a little bit underwhelmed. So, again, there's a lot of things to like about this Giants receiving room. There is. They've got a lot of solid guys. And again, you do kind of ask that question of, would you rather a receiving room with one or two really good receivers and a bunch of four other guys that are below average, or a bunch of good receivers, probably none of them Pro Bowl level, but they're all solid, they're all serviceable? The Giants take the latter. They like 6 guys, a lot of young, a lot of youth. There's a lot of upside. Now, believe me, if Wan'Dale Robinson turns into this speed demon, he's going to be really good for a really long time. If Jalen Hyatt turns into what I think he is, I think he's really good. Now, it's going to take him time to develop. But he's a guy, borderline first-round talent the Giants got in the later round. So there is a lot to like there. But I still get this feeling that they still might be missing that legit number one threat. Now, they are getting that in their tight end. They are getting that in Darren Waller. Obviously, a very good tight end. The one issue with Darren Waller is, again, the last 2 years, he's played 18 games combined in the last 2 seasons. 18 games combined in the last 2 seasons for Darren Waller. When you look at Darren Waller, he obviously was with the Raiders. He had the 2 big years with the Raiders, 1,145 yards, 1,196 yards. That was the Giants' big offseason acquisition. But when you look at Waller the last 2 years, the numbers have decreased a little bit just because of the injuries, just because of the limited playing time. The last 2 years playing 20 games combined in the last 2 seasons. I apologize, I said 18, I mean 20. So, Waller, we all know what Waller's capable of when he's healthy. But the last 2 years, he hasn't been. So you're relying on a guy that is 30 now. He's going to be 31 in early September. Right after week 1, he's going to be 31. Can you fully rely on him to stay healthy? When he's healthy, he's one of the better tight ends in football. We know that. But the health is an issue. Now, Daniel Bellinger looked phenomenal at training camp, or at OTAs. There was a picture of Daniel Bellinger at OTAs, and he's jacked. And you look at what he was last year going into his rookie season, and this year, there's a lot. Got to be pretty excited there if you're a Giants fan seeing what he looked like. But, again, I do like, there's certain things I do like about this receiving core, but I still feel like at times they're lacking that legit number one. I'll tell you this. If the Giants would to sign DeAndre Hopkins right now, and you have DeAndre Hopkins, Darren Waller, and you add Campbell, Wan'Dale Robinson, Slate, and all those guys, Jalen Hyatt into the mix, you're looking at probably a really good receiving core, just with one guy can do. Again, Hopkins isn't quite the guy he once was, but you look at his production last year after the PED suspension to start the season, he was really good. If he would have played the entire year last year, he would have been over 1,000 yards. And that's my next point. The Giants' leading receiver last year was Darius Slayton with 724 yards. When you look at these 6 receivers with the Giants, they don't have a single guy here that had 1,000 yards last year other than Jalen Hyatt, and that's college. He had 1,267 yards last year for Tennessee. Outside of him, Isaiah Hodgins, 392 yards. Darius Slayton, 724. Paris Campbell, 623. Wan'Dale Robinson, 227. Sterling Shepard, 154. that is a little bit of a concern. They did not have a 1,000-yard receiver last year on the roster. Now, if Shepard stays healthy, would he be on that caliber? Probably not. I don't think he's ever done it before in his career. Slayton's good. Is he 1,000 yards good? Probably not. Shepard can give you 600, 700. He can give you 750, 800 in a good year. I think his career high is 872, which he achieved in 2018 when he played 16 games. If Shepard gives you a full season, which he hasn't given the Giants since 2018, if he gives you a full season, he's capable of giving you 800-plus yards. He can definitely do it. He's proven it before. But can he do that, right? That's the concern. Darius Slayton's another guy, again. He's only 20. He's 26. He's been in the league now for only 4 seasons. His career high came in 2020 when he had 751 yards. So he can give you 700 yards so far. We've proven. Can he get to that next level and give you 800, 850? Maybe he cracks 900. Can he do that? Daniel Jones improves. Can he get to that next level? Maybe Darius Slayton breaks into that. And that's where I feel like the Giants are relying on not unproven talent, but they're relying on all these guys to maybe hope that one of them breaks into this big guy. Like Paris Campbell, now that he gets consistent playing time, can he break into this big-time receiver? Can Slayton now, his 5th year in the league, had a good year last year, another year with Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones has improved, 2nd year in the system. Can he break out and be this legit number one? I feel like the Giants, and maybe that's their thought process, are just hoping that one of these 6 guys, primarily Slayton or Hodgins or somebody like that, can break into this legitimate number one. And again, I think I like Isaiah Hodgins. I do. I think he's solid. Now, can you rely on him to be a number one? I don't know. He played 8 games last year at 351 yards. There is a lot to like about that. I think there's, he had the big game in the playoffs with the Vikings. He had 8 catches for 105 yards. Didn't do anything against Philly, but again, the Giants offense as a whole didn't do anything against Philly. So, asking you Giants fans, do you feel like this team is lacking a legitimate number one? Or are you okay with the receiving core that they have and knowing the kind of path that the Giants are on maybe next year? When you look at some of the free agent receivers that are available, the Giants maybe go after and look at a big-time trade. Again, and this is thinking way down the road. Let's just say, as I mentioned earlier on in the podcast, if Terry McLaurin becomes available, is he a guy that, the Giants go out and trade? Is Washington going to do it in their own division? Who knows? If the Giants are willing to give up some, good picks for it, maybe they'll be willing to, but is he a guy to look into down the road? DeAndre Hopkins available. Doesn't seem like Giants will go after him, but if the Giants go after DeAndre Hopkins, this receiving core turns into an above-average receiving core to a really good receiving core, just by the acquisition of one guy bringing a legitimate number one. That's what this team lacks, is a legitimate number one. And again, you like Waller. Waller's really good, but I still feel like they at times could be lacking that number one. But again, who knows? Maybe a guy like Darius Slayton breaks out this year. Maybe that's the Giant thought process. And it seems like Dable and Shane are kind of going through that thought process of, all right, we'll roll with this core this season, continue to build with Daniel Jones, and then if we see continued progress, then next year, let's say Slayton really has a big year. Let's say Jalen Hyatt. Again, I'm not trying to say that he's going to have a great year, but let's say, Jalen Hyatt. Maybe he has a huge year like Garrett Wilson did and wins Rookie of the Year. There's a lot of potential when you look at this Giants receiving core, but potential can only go so far. Right? Potential is potential for a reason. It hasn't happened yet, and it might not happen. But there is that potential. It does happen. There's potential Darius Slayton has a big year this year and turns into a 1,000-yard receiver. There's potential that Jalen Hyatt has a huge year and is an under-the-radar draft pick and has a big season for the Giants. Wan'Dale Robinson, after getting hurt last year, second season comes in and has a big year. If Shepard can stay healthy and he can give you 800, 850 yards, that would be solid. There's a lot of potential there. But there's also that potential of none of that happens, and there's a lot of injuries and there's a lot of inconsistency, and you're sitting in the same spot next offseason as you were this offseason, searching for answers, searching for that legitimate number one. And that's why I still feel like the Giants should still try and go out and try and get a legitimate number one. I wouldn't be against bringing in a big-time name of DeAndre Hopkins if you're a Giants fan. That's my view on it. Not a bad group, but maybe lacking that big number one guy. I still feel like they're lacking that. And again, many Giants fans, you might like this core. And that's fine. But when you look at the other division, everybody in your division has a legitimate number one. You can't say the same about the Giants. But they do have Darren Waller. They do got Saquon, despite the the contract issues. They still got him. They've got Daniel Jones, who showed a lot of improvements last year. You look at the defensive side of the ball, there's a lot of things to like there. They shored up the secondary with the Deonte Banks draft pick. There's still a lot to like about this team, and especially the coaching staff, what they did in year one, winning 9 games and getting to the postseason and winning a postseason game against a much more experienced Vikings team was a heck of an accomplishment. But are they quite ready yet to legitimate take that next step when you look at where their offense and the weapons currently stand? Have they gotten that much better? Sure, they've improved a little bit, but still might not quite be where many expected them to be after year one or after last year. But we'll see. We'll see. I could be wrong. Hit me up down below. Comments. What are your thoughts on the New York Giants receiving corps? Good enough? Not good enough? Like it? Don't like it? Do you want them to go after a number one? Are you content if they don't, but wouldn't mind? Are you kind of in the middle where you like the receiving corps where it is right now, but you wouldn't mind for them to go after, or you would like for them to go after a number one, but you wouldn't be upset if they don't? What are your thoughts? Put them in the comments down below on the Giants receiving corps right now as currently constructed. All right, so now I move on here to an interesting topic today. Again, I don't talk much golf on this channel. I primarily watch 4 sports. It's baseball, basketball, football, and hockey, as you all know. You can tell by my setup. I don't watch much golf. I have gone into a little bit more golf over the last year. I was watching the Masters. I watch the PGA tour, all their tournaments and stuff, and I'll turn it on a little bit, like if the Yankee game finishes and there's a little, nothing really on, or sometimes I'll flip it on and flip between, if the Yankees have like a 1:00 game on a Saturday, I'll finish watching the Yankee game, and then, if there's golf on, I'll turn it on and flip between golf and baseball and whatever might be on. So I have gotten into it a little bit in terms of the watching aspect. It's an awesome sport to play. It's a lot of fun to play, but I have gone into it a little bit in terms of the watching aspect. Over the last year, I went from watching no golf to watching a little bit of golf. I don't watch every weekend. I will tell you that. I did not watch like the past tournament. They run tournaments every weekend, Thursday through Sunday for the PGA. I didn't watch anything this past weekend. I don't even know what the tournament was called this past weekend. I watch a little bit of it. And I'll flip it on here time to time. I can name you a couple guys from PGA, from LIV, stuff like that, but I'm not a big golf watcher. So I don't watch, talk a ton of golf on here. This would probably be the only time I talk golf. So if you're looking for golf content, here's your lucky day, but I'm not going to talk much about it otherwise. But this is a big story in terms of not just golf, but actually the sports world that kind of struck the sports world today when you look at PGA and LIV. And obviously, for those of you that, I'm sure many of you know, but the PGA was once, the big golf thing. Then Saudi, the government, the, big money, they were giving it to all the players. They made you live golf. Many guys from PGA, a couple guys like Brooks Koepka, Phil Mickelson was obviously one of the big headline guys that switched from PGA to live golf. Their contracts are massive. The amount of money they're making is massive. It's a little bit different in terms of the game. The golf, PGA, they play the typical 72 holes, over a 4-day weekend. The golf, however, or PGA, or not the PGA, the LIV golf. So the PGA tournaments are 4 days. It's Thursday through Sunday every weekend. They run them every weekend throughout the year. Some of the big guys in the PGA are like Victor Hovland, You've obviously got McIlroy. You've got, John Rahm, who won the PGA championship, or not the PGA championship, I apologize, the Masters. You've got Patrick Cantlay. So there are a lot of talent still in the PGA, but you had a lot of guys like Cam Smith. You had Bryson DeChambeau. You had Phil Mickelson. You had Brooks Koepka. A lot of guys as well that moved over to LIV. And that's just a few. There's a ton of guys that move over to LIV. It's a little different, though. LIV does tournaments Friday through Sunday. PGA does Thursday through Sunday. So LIV Golf plays 54 holes over a 3-day tournament, while PGA obviously does 72 holes over a 4-day tournament. One less day, obviously 18 less holes. LIV Golf does a shotgun start, so everybody tees off at the same time, opposed to PGA where everybody has a different tee time throughout the day. As the tournament goes on, as the weekend goes on, you'll have, your big finals matchup tees off last between the two finals, obviously. LIV, it's a little different there. LIV also has teams PGA doesn't, other than, like, the Ryder Cup, which is kind of, I guess, like, team-oriented and stuff. Other than that, PGA does not do a really big, PGA doesn't do team. So those are the main differences there when you look at the LIV and PGA. And obviously when LIV was created, it was very controversial among, sports, among many people, whether or not it was a good idea with the whole, Saudi Arabia government, whatever your thoughts on that. I'm not going to get into the whole political side of it, but that was, obviously the big thing. So LIV breaks off, and it's just funny because for a couple years now, ever since, PGA and LIV the LIV broke off and made their own thing, the PGA has been very critical, has, gone back at LIV, shots fired at, fired shots at LIV, have really just, kind of, LIV and PGA don't like each other. That's the bottom line. The commissioners, the heads of each league do not like each other at all. And it's just funny now that you hear the news today, and that's what was most shocking was, it's not shocking anymore to see guys move to LIV. The contracts are huge. The money is huge. It's not surprising to see PGA players go to LIV. But it was surprising to see the PGA Tour, LIV Golf, and another DP World Tour, which is based out of, it's a European tour. It's out of the two of these, that's like the least relevant tour. They have now all come together, and they're all going to merge as one giant, like, golf league. And LIV does team type stuff. Like, they play team golf. So whatever team obviously, gets the lowest score obviously wins. So PGA, it's all solo. LIV has team golf. So you'll probably see more team golf included. But it's just interesting to see how the PGA and LIV, who hated each other, comes together now, merges as one, and now basically all this other stuff is like out the window because they're one big thing now. And PGA, to be honest with you, did not do a very good job of communicating with the players. You heard many players today talk about how they have no clue anything was happening, that they had no clue any of this was supposed to happen. The PGA, did not do a very good job communicating with the players. Colin Morikawa, who is obviously, a PGA Tour member, mentioned that, it's interesting to find morning news or fun to find morning news out on Twitter. So there wasn't much communication there between the commissioner, the head of the PGA, and obviously, the PGA Tour commissioner, who is John Mohannan, and the PGA players. So there does seem to be a little bit of a disconnect there. But at the end of the day, it's just interesting to look back on this and see how PGA Tour and golf, or the LIV Golf, I should say, hated each other. And now money gets involved, more money for both sides. Oh, now we love each other. We're friends. We're going to merge. We're going to make one big league. This is great for golf. Now, it's probably going to have team golf. We're also hearing now that the players that went to LIV can now go back to PGA, I guess, if they want to. And again, it's interesting. I don't think personally, just from me watching golf, and I'm not a golf expert. I'm not one to, I like playing it. It's a lot of fun. I don't like, I'm not like a golf expert. I like, watching it from time to time. I don't watch every weekend, but I will watch if it's on and if there's not much else on. But it does seem like they're going to do more team-oriented stuff. I do feel that LIV Golf, the competition wasn't as good as PGA. But it's just interesting because, you kind of wonder now what's going to happen to, it's all one big thing now. So, how does this affect all the tournaments? What is this going to, fully look like? But a lot of money involved in this. There's a lot of money involved in this. You kind of get the sense that the PGA players that didn't move over to LIV, don't fully like this. Guys from LIV, you heard not Brooks Koepka, I apologize. Phil Mickelson tweet out today that he was happy about it. So he said it was like a great day or whatever. So it's interesting. I find it interesting how they hate each other. Money gets involved. Here comes PGA Tour, LIV Golf, DP World Tour, which is kind of like the third party in this all. They're not really, not trying to be mean, they're not really relevant. It's mainly PGA and LIV, the two big golf associations here that are merging to make one big thing. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting. There's a lot of talent out there that did move over to LIV, though. I mean, you got Brooks Koepka, you got DeChambeau, you've got Phil Mickelson. That's just a few to name. Mickelson was obviously one of the big ones. Also with some of the things he said, obviously a lot of the media, he was pretty big name there. But I have a list. So yeah, Mickelson, Brooks Koepka, Dustin Johnson, Bryson DeChambeau, Patrick Reed, Sergio Garcia, Bubba Watson are just some of the names. Those are some of the top stars. I believe Cam Smith too, who won the Open last year, also moved to LIV after he won the Open, got a big paycheck there. So it's interesting. For some people, some people's view on this is they kind of had to do it, the PGA with just the way, the money and all the players moving over and stuff. You felt like it was eventually going to happen, or you felt like it was eventually going to happen for golf. But I don't know. This isn't a good look for the PGA. It's not a good look for the PGA. It's really not because, and again, to the players too, you could tell some of the players are upset. The commissioner didn't communicate to the players of the PGA, John Mohannan. He didn't communicate to the players. And again, after publicly criticizing LIV Golf all the time, he now says, let's merge and this is better for golf that we merge after trashing LIV Golf so many times. So, and again, they're going to take some things from LIV Golf and implement it into this one big merge, this one big league. So, it's interesting. It's not a good look, though, for the PGA. It's not. How does it affect golf? How does it affect the players? That's to be seen. But the initial view on this is the PGA, after saying all they said, after trashing LIV all the time, now to say, they're our friends, this is great, not a good look for them. I will tell you that. So that's my feelings on all this. We'll see. It's going to be interesting, though, to see how this all ends up playing out and what happens to all this and how this ends up, how the entertainment factor of this all ends up unfolding. All right, so now we move on to a little bit of baseball here and what's going on tonight. Obviously, the NBA Finals and NHL tonight both have the night off. The NBA Finals will be back tomorrow in Miami. As for the Stanley Cup, it will be back Thursday in Florida for a must-win for the Florida Panthers as they look to get back into the series. When you look at tonight's game for the Yankees, you got the Yankees-White Sox. The Yankees fresh off the series win in L.A. against the Dodgers, 7:05 Eastern on Yes. Lucas Giolito on the mound for the White Sox. He's 4-4 with a 4.08 ERA, and the Yankees got Clark Schmidt on the mound. He's 2-5 with a 5.01 ERA. Over-under for this game set at 8.5. White Sox have not had a good year. They come into this game 9 games under 500. Yankees are 11 up on 500. We did get some bad news today. Judge is not in the lineup tonight, and we're hearing that they're going to know later today, by today, whether or not he's on the IL or not. So hoping that he's not on the IL. If he is on the IL, you hope it's a quick stint with the injury, obviously, when he crashed into the wall in L.A. But we'll see how all that ends up playing out. Aaron Boone joined Talking Yanks today talking about that earlier on. We'll also get to the Mets-Braves here. Mets even 500 entering this series. Braves 11 games up on 500. The Mets got Carlos Carrasco, who's been good his last 2 outings out tonight. He's 2-2 with a 5.79 5 ERA, and the Braves have Elder on the mound, who has been phenomenal this year for the Braves. Has been one of the better pitchers in baseball. So So they've got Bryce Elder tonight for the Braves. He's 3-0 with a 1.92 ERA. And with that being said, so you got Carrasco, Elder tonight. Tomorrow night you got Charlie Morton and Max Scherzer. And then Thursday you'll have Verlander and Spencer Strider. So the Mets have, right now, you could probably say 3 of their best pitchers going. And I want to provide context because you have Carrasco, who has been really good his last two outings. Verlander and Scherzer are your 1-2 punch. So you got that going for you. But when you look at the Braves, though, tonight the Braves do have Bryce Elder. They have the pitching advantage today. Tomorrow, you probably say it's Scherzer over Morton. Thursday, it's probably Strider over Verlander. They're both very good, but it's probably Spencer Strider. It's definitely Spencer Strider and Verlander, especially when you look at this year's numbers. So, the best bet for the Mets is probably to, if the Mets lose tonight and tomorrow, they're probably not winning the series. When you look at the pitching matchups, Braves should at least come away with this with 2 of 3. But after all, the Mets do have 2 of their best pitchers on the mound. So I guess it gives them a chance. I mean, if the offense can score runs, that's the biggest thing. The offense can't seem to score runs. So we'll see. Mets, Braves, big series coming up here. The fallout from this series will be very large because if they struggle this series and lose and get swept and then maybe lose 2 of 3 in Pittsburgh and have a 1-5 road trip, I mean, a lot of people are going to be calling, a lot of people are calling for Buck's head now. A lot of people, even more people, are going to be calling for Buck Showalter to be fired after that because then you'd be 31-35. And you'd be looking, you're probably even deeper in the division. There's a chance by that point, if the Phillies, who are playing the Tigers right now, they'll probably win the next 2. I believe it's a 3-game set, so they'll probably win the next 2. Trey Turner had a really big game last night. They could potentially jump you. I mean, you're coming away with this road trip. If you go 1-5, there's a chance you come away from this road trip like 4th in the NL East. You're 3rd right now, 5.5. That's already bad. There's a chance you come away 4th in the NL East after this road trip if it's that bad. And if you're 4th, second to last in the NL East with the amount of money you spent in this roster, you can't tell me the manager's seat won't be a little warm. Again, not saying he should be fired, but at least a little warm as to, hey, you got to have a little bit of an urgency here. If, we head into the All-Star break and you're 12 games out of this division, which right now might seem crazy, but, their schedule's brutal coming up. I mean, they got the Astros coming up. They got the Brewers coming up. They got the Braves coming up right now. They've got the Yankees. Their schedule is not good coming up. And they lost against all the bad teams. So what makes you think they're going to beat all these good teams? Unless if it's reverse. Unless if the Mets play down to the bad opponents and beat the good teams. I don't know. But we'll see. It starts tonight. Series against the Braves. Big 6-game road trip. Braves and Pittsburgh coming up. So that will do it for the podcast here today. Comment down below your thoughts on the Giants receiving room and your thoughts on the PGA and LIV Golf combining after, past year or two have been a lot of controversial, a lot of shots fired from both leagues. They've now come together, and we'll see how that ends up playing out. But anyway, that will do it for the podcast here today. As always, hope you enjoyed it. I will see you all back here tomorrow, and thanks for watching.